Mr. Nixon, thank you for joining us today. We appreciate you taking the time to be here.
Not a problem, sir.
So I guess we'll go ahead and go on the record. Good to go. Okay.
Yes, sir.
So this will be the Rule 30b-6 deposition of the City of Atlanta, taken pursuant to notice and agreement. The deposition is taken in the case Tyler Griffin versus the City of Atlanta. The deposition will be taken pursuant to the federal rules of civil procedure and for all purposes permitted under those rules, including use of trial. And the deposition is being taken on Zoom because of the COVID pandemic. Could we go ahead and swear in the witness?
Yes, sir. Before we get started, I will ask counsel to please identify yourself and state on the record that you have no objection to this officer of the court administering a binding oath to this witness via Zoom. If we could please begin with the noticing attorney.
Sure. Matt Kahn for the plaintiff. And no objection.
Jeb Butler for the plaintiff.
Alicia Marie Nair for the City of Atlanta, no objection.
Stacey Miller for the defendants and no objection.
Jaquita Parks for the defendants, no objections.
Thank you. Mr. Nixon, if you will please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're going to give in this cause will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
And how long have you been with APD?
22 and a half years.
And how long have you been an investigator?
Since 2006. So.
And are you with the internal affairs part of OPS?
Yes, sir.
Do you investigate police misconduct?
Yes, sir.
And do you investigate allegations of excessive force by APD officers?
Yes, sir, I
do. Have you ever investigated allegations of excessive force and found that the use of force was unreasonable?
Yes.
And can you give an example?
Objection. Mr. Investigator Nixon is here to testify as to topics 1 and 11. This goes outside of the scope of those.
Okay, and just for the record, he has been designated for those topics, but we are free to ask him questions within his personal knowledge. So, Mr. Nixon, if you can answer.
Yes. There was an instance where an officer was called to a restaurant it was a criminal trespass issue, but while talking to the suspect, it turned into a very brutal physical altercation that wasn't called for. As a result, that officer is no longer with the department.
Okay, and what was that officer's name?
Lancelot.
Do you recall when that happened?
Maybe about a year and a half ago.
Did you start with APD as a recruit?
Yes, I did.
And do you have any law enforcement experience predating your time with APD?
I was a military police officer in the military, and I was a Georgia corrections officer prior to APD.
Okay. And when did you first start working in law enforcement?
If you want to use the Georgia corrections, that would be in April of 1997. I was a correction officer, and I got hired with APD in December of 97. And prior to both of those, I was in the military.
And what branch of the military?
Air Force.
Air Force. Thank you for your service.
Thank you.
What sort of police training do you have?
With APD, it's the I think that's a very broad question, but arrest procedures, criminal procedure, just everything that entails being a police officer.
Okay. Have you undergone use of force training?
Yes, sir.
And have you taught or instructed other police officers on use of force?
No, sir.
Have you taught or instructed other police officers on any subject?
No, sir. No. That requires an instructor certification, and I don't have that.
Okay. Would it be fair to say that as an OPS investigator, you have the ability to apply APD's standard operating procedures to real-world scenarios?
Yes. As the investigation goes on, yes, sir.
And as an OPS investigator, isn't it true that you have to be able to apply the standard operating procedures to real-world scenarios? Excuse me.
To see if there's a violation?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Have you ever reported another officer for the use of excessive force?
It has come since I've been here in the unit, I believe so, because sometimes we'll see situations come up as a result, some serious situations that will come up as a result of the investigation.
And can you share an example of one of the times that you've reported another officer?
We had a situation where I didn't necessarily report it. We were looking at video, and the use of the N-word came out while we were investigating one situation. The use of the N-word came out while we were looking at the video.
And so I guess, have you ever reported another officer for excessive force versus abusive language or inappropriate language?
Not that I can recall, no, sir.
Okay. Have you ever testified in an official proceeding that another officer used unnecessary force?
No, sir.
In your career as a police officer, have you ever seen another officer use what you'd consider to be excessive force in the field?
Objection beyond the scope.
You can answer.
No, sir. Not that I can recall. No, sir.
Okay. Do you understand that we asked to speak with someone who could testify on behalf of the city of Atlanta on various subjects?
Yes.
And you understand that the city chose you to testify about the identities and roles of various witnesses in this case?
Yes, sir.
And the city also chose you to testify about the city's discovery responses in this case?
Yes, sir.
And you understand that the answers that you give today will be binding on the city of Atlanta?
Yes, sir.
Have you ever been deposed before?
Yes, sir.
How many times have you been deposed?
Maybe 4.
And were those cases involving allegations of the excessive use of force by a city of Atlanta police officer?
Yes, they're more specifically also involved shootings.
All right, I'm going to briefly share my screen with you. Can you see the document I have labeled as Plaintiff's Exhibit 99 on your screen?
Yes, sir.
And have you seen this document before?
Yes, sir.
And from my understanding, you've been designated to speak on topic number 1. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And then also on topic 11. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Are there any other topics on this list that you have been asked to speak about?
No, sir.
Excluding conversations with your lawyers who are here with us today and may not be here. What did you do to prepare for today's deposition?
I reviewed the file.
And when you refer to the file, what specifically are you referring to?
The write-up, I did the write-up in the body-worn camera. And also, we don't see the charges, the punishment, I would say, of the accused officer at all, unless a situation like this comes about. And I was able to see what the officers involved, what the punishment was.
Okay, so typically you make a recommendation as to what a punishment should be, and then it's sort of off your desk.
No, sir. No, we don't make a recommendation. We just find the facts. And when I turn it in, I don't see it again ever unless a situation like this comes up. And then when I do see it, I see how my supervisor wrote up, he should be sustained for this or not sustained for that, exonerated. And that's the first I see of it.
Okay. And who is your supervisor?
That would be Lieutenant Zenilai. Well, he's a captain now, but at the time, Lieutenant Zenilai.
Okay. Did you review the lawsuit that was filed in this case?
Yes. What the plaintiff is alleging?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Did you review any of the City of Atlanta's discovery responses?
Yes.
And which ones did you review?
I have the can you see it? I have this, which is the I think that's what you have on the screen. And plaintiff's request for production. Now I have the plaintiff's first request for production, the responses.
Oh, is that? I'm sorry, I didn't realize you'd finished. Do you have the responses to the request for admission?
I do.
And do you have the responses to the request for production of documents?
I'm sure I do. I'm sure I do. It's a lot of paperwork, but I'm sure I do.
Okay. Did you read the interrogatory responses in their entirety?
Not in their entirety, no, sir.
Which ones did you focus on?
What I was scheduled to testify on.
Okay. So any interrogatory dealing with witnesses or their roles in the case?
Yes, exactly.
And then which request for admission did you look at?
Which request for admission?
Yes, sir.
I'm sorry, can you break that down a little bit for me?
Sure. Did you look at any of the city's responses to the plaintiff's request for admission?
I glanced over some of them, but I just, I did look at 1 and 11.
And when you 1 and 11 being the topics on Plaintiff's Exhibit 99?
Correct, the witnesses and their roles.
Okay. Is there anything that you disagreed with in the city's responses to the plaintiff's request for admission?
Did I disagree with? No.
Is there anything that you disagree with in the city's responses to plaintiff's interrogatories?
No, no, sir.
Did you watch any of the body camera footage of the officers involved in this case to prepare
did.
for the deposition?
I did.
I beg your pardon, but it looks like one of the other witnesses has entered the meeting. Mr. Fight?
Yes, I apologize. I was just making sure I was set up for later. I can exit out of the meeting.
All right, thank you, SPL Fight. We'll see you at 3. We'll
Yes,
keep
ma'am.
you updated.
Thank
Thank
you.
And thank you, Jennifer.
You're welcome.
Okay, looks like you left. Okay, well, when was the last time you watched the video? Body camera?
Yesterday. Yesterday.
And have you watched all of the body camera footage?
Yes.
Did you review any of the documents that the city of Atlanta produced in this case?
As far as the request for production and those items,
Yes, sir.
yes.
And what specifically did you review?
I guess it would be the same thing as before, the plaintiff's request for production.
Mm-hmm. So I guess maybe I should be a little clearer. In preparing for the deposition today, did you look at any of the physical documents that the city produced in the case that were Bates labeled?
I'm sure I glanced over it, but I more looked at the video and the file in preparation for the deposition.
Okay.
The actual investigative file that I did.
And has your entire investigative file been produced in the case?
Yes, sir, it has.
Okay. Did you review any of APD's standard operating procedures to prepare today?
Prepare for today? No.
Are you generally familiar with the SOPs?
Yeah, generally, yes, sir. Mm-hmm.
Besides your attorneys, did you speak with any city employees to prepare for today's deposition?
No, sir.
Okay. When you're investigating an allegation of excessive force, what are you generally looking for?
The reasonableness and the necessary. Was it reasonable that the officer did whatever it is he or she did, and was it necessary that the officer did whatever he or she did?
And what is the standard for reasonableness as you understand it?
There's a case law, Graham v. Connor. It's the totality of the whole situation. You have to look at the whole situation and apply, was it reasonable and was it necessary that the officer did whatever it is they did. Each investigation is situational. So each one has to be looked at independently, and you have to take the reasonableness and the necessary. Was it reasonable that this officer did whatever it is they did? And was it absolutely necessary that they did what they did?
Okay. So would you agree that police officers should only use force if it's necessary?
Correct. Yes, sir.
And would you agree that if required to use force, police officers should only use reasonable force?
Correct. Yes, sir.
Would you agree that police officers should attempt to de-escalate a situation before using force?
Most definitely. Yes, sir.
Is it fair to say that an officer's subjective belief that force is necessary alone is not enough to justify the use of force?
Yes,
Objection.
I'm sorry, can you, was that a yes?
yes.
Okay, thank you. The decision to use force has to be reasonable under an objective standard, correct?
Correct.
And what does that objective standard mean to you?
Objection as to form.
You can answer.
That to look at it from the objective. You have to just like stand outside of yourself and look at it and say, okay, if I was a stranger just looking at this, would it be right for this person to do what they're doing?
Okay.
Not knowing what I know as far as the law and our policies and whatnot.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. Excuse me. What are the various outcomes of an investigation of police misconduct?
What are the outcomes?
Yes, sir.
You can be exonerated, you can be sustained, which is basically like guilty, or you can be not sustained, which is we can't prove that you did whatever it is you did. Exoneration is we have proof to show that you did not do what you're accused of. Sustained is we have something saying that you did what you did, and not sustained just means that you're not guilty, but only because we couldn't prove it.
Okay, so that covers my next questions, which was what's the difference between not sustained and exonerated, so we can skip
Right.
that.
Yeah.
What does unfounded mean?
There's no basis for the complaint at all. Like the complainant completely fabricated the allegation.
Okay, and how would you arrive at a conclusion of unfounded?
Body worn camera. If the complainant said the officer punched me in the nose and we look at the body worn camera and it never happened, then we can unfound it.
Okay, is the biggest factor in determining the outcome generally going to be the body worn camera?
Yeah, it is now. The body worn camera has been instrumental in exoneration, sustaining, and unfounding.
Okay. Because
that's our proof. We pretty much need some type of proof to unfound and to exonerate.
So in a situation where it's the police officer's word versus the word of the arrestee, and there's no video proof, what sort of designation would you give that situation?
If it's a situation that we just say the officer is accused of taking some money and not turning some money, the officer says he didn't take it, the complainant saying he did, we don't have any proof saying either or, then that would be a not sustained.
Okay. Once you conclude an investigation and a complaint is sustained, do you make disciplinary recommendations?
No, sir. That's totally out of not my level.
What department or component of the APD makes the actual recommendations of discipline?
That would be the employee's chain of command, which would be the Deputy Chief of FOD, Field Operations Division. On this list, it would be Chief Glazier. So he would be the one to recommend discipline.
And when you say chain of command, does that mean, so the deputy chief, is that someone who's working closely with the officer being investigated?
He's not working. The file eventually will land on his desk.
Okay.
We have 6 different deputy chiefs. Each deputy chief is in charge of a different facet in the department, and the zones all fall under one deputy chief. And at the time of this incident, it was Chief Glazier.
Are you familiar? So I'm sorry. Did you have something to add?
No, just after I investigate it and give it to my lieutenant gives it to our major, and it goes up to Chief Glazier's desk. Then he takes a look at it, and if it's sustained, then he's the one that recommends the discipline.
Okay. And as you're reviewing a file, do you ever form personal opinions as to whether or not or how the police officer should be disciplined?
Yeah, it comes up. Yeah.
Okay. And are you familiar with the various types of discipline?
There are so many. You can have an oral admonishment. You can have a suspension. You can be terminated. There are many.
Okay.
No problem. It's up to the discretion of the deputy chief.
Are there guidelines that suggest what sort of discipline should be given for certain types of infractions?
Yes, there is.
And are those guidelines mandatory, or are they totally discretionary?
No, I believe it's mandatory. It falls within a range of, if you did this, then you can be disciplined up to within this guideline. You may not get the brunt of it, and you might not get the lesser end of it. You might come somewhere in between.
So if someone were accused and found, or accused and sustained for violating a serious rule, the person awarding the discipline would have to give the disciplinary outcome that falls within the range set by the rules.
Objection as to form, but you may answer, Investigator Nixon, if you know.
I'm sorry, what was that objection?
The objection is to the form, as to the form of your question, but if Investigator Nixon is able to answer your question, he may.
Okay.
Can you ask the question one more time?
Sure. Let me see if I can rephrase it a little bit. So if a police officer is found to have violated a serious rule that, say, requires suspension from 4 to 10 days, and that the deputy chief does not discipline that officer within that range, is that something that would be a rule violation?
Yeah, if it's, I'm speaking, not that I've seen this, but I would say it would be.
Okay. Would you agree that the prohibition of unreasonable force must carry consequences to dissuade officers from using excessive force?
Yes.
And would it be fair to say that without real consequences for using excessive force, police officers could use force with impunity?
I can see where that would happen, yes.
If an officer is accused of using excessive force numerous times, does that trigger a more in-depth investigation of subsequent allegations of excessive force?
We have what's called a it's an alert system that's supposed to trigger. I'm not involved with the alert system. Our file room is, but if an officer has repeated instances of use of force, there's a system in place that's supposed to alert us that we have met, we might have to get him some help, or is there something going on in his life, that sort of thing.
Okay. And what's that system called?
Early warning.
And is that is the early warning system, is that like a computer program, or is it just someone who's monitoring the numbers and making a recommendation?
I believe it's a computer program. Once the information is entered into the system, like say if an officer has 10 instances of use of force, hopefully the system would catch it before the 10th one, but by whatever the gauge is that we're supposed to catch it, once it's entered in as an official complaint, it's supposed to trigger the early warning.
Okay. And so, and how does it, I guess, how do you receive the notification of an early warning? Like, how does that, does that come up in your investigations?
I don't. When I get the file, it's I only have what is in front of me, and I don't know what their past is. What they like, if I get a John Doe complaint and John Doe is accused of use of force, if John Doe had 10 use of forces in the past, I won't know about it.
Okay. I guess is a history of the use of excessive force something that you would find relevant to your investigation?
It would put some context into it, but I would have to investigate this particular investigation on its own merits. But I can see where the past can add to it, but I'm only to look at this particular investigation.
Okay, that makes sense. What role did you play in the investigation of Donald Vickers' use of force?
I was the investigator.
And so you interviewed Donald Vickers?
Yes.
Do you have an independent recollection of your interview with Defendant Vickers?
Yes, I do.
Okay, so let me take a step back. How many use of force investigations are you generally performing in a given year?
I'm on the officer involved shooting team, so that adds to it. You want a number?
Sure, if you can.
Maybe 15, maybe no more than about 20 a year.
And just speaking generally now, between those 15 to 20 allegations of excessive force, how many are generally going to be sustained?
Now, our officer involved our shootings, they're police shootings, but they are a use of force. The majority of those are good shootings. But we do have some use of force investigations where the officer is sustained, like the example I gave earlier with Officer Lancerot. I would say about maybe 30 to 40%.
Okay.
My use of force investigations, I would go a little bit higher than the 20, but I would say about 30 or 40%.
All right. All right. So we'll get back into the specific investigation of Vickers. When you were interviewing Donald Vickers, did you doubt his truthfulness at all?
No. Well, no. A lot of the truthfulness, it's their perception of what they perceive. Like I can ask, like in my shootings, the officer may think one thing, but it's actually something else. I shot 10 times, but they really only shot twice. So with Vickers, I didn't think he was lying.
Okay. You seem to hesitate a little bit. Was there something strange about your interview with Defendant Vickers?
No. I just had to go back. I watched so much body camera that the interview, but that was like secondary instead of the body camera. I watched the body camera a lot.
Okay. And did Donald Vickers' story make sense to you as a police officer?
Objection. You may answer. It's speculative, but objection.
Yes, it did.
What did you do to prepare for your interview of Donald Vickers?
Watch the body camera.
And I think you may have answered this, but did you review his disciplinary history before the interview?
No.
Did you speak with any of the other witnesses before interviewing Donald Vickers?
No.
And so when you're studying the body cam footage, how much time would you say you're spending like looking at the video and watching it and rewatching it?
That can be time consuming because you're rewinding. I've got software where I can put it slow motion, and you don't want to miss anything. So with the different, I believe there was 5 or 6 videos, you just want to watch it so you can get a total picture of what happened.
Okay. And so of the 5 to 6 videos in this case, how many times would you say you watched each of those videos?
Each video, I'd say maybe no more than 4, because I would watch Vickers and the ABAD's video more so than the other videos, but I have seen the other videos.
Okay. In this case, which video do you think is the most important?
ABAD's.
So I know you said that you hadn't looked at Vickers' disciplinary history, but before interviewing Vickers, were you aware of his disciplinary history?
No, when I met Vickers, that was my first time ever meeting him.
As we sit here today, are you aware of his disciplinary history?
I've heard that, I guess he's got some stuff going on.
Does having knowledge of Vickers' disciplinary history change your view of what you were looking at of the body cam footage?
Objection.
No, and that's where I kind of like, I'm glad I don't know the officer's history. That way I don't go in with a preconceived opinion about whatever the situation is. It was only until I guess when all this started surfacing is when I started hearing about he had some things going on in his history.
Okay. And when you say some things going on in his history, what does that mean to you?
I think some use of force situations.
As we sit here today, how many instances of use of force allegations against Mr. Vickers are you aware of?
I think at least one, but like I said, I hadn't seen it, but just when this lawsuit came up and we were prepping for the lawsuit and the file room was letting me know what was going on, his name came up and I guess he had some things going on.
Okay. Is it fair to say that prior complaints of excessive force make it more likely that the officer being investigated used excessive force at that given time?
There's a probable cause to believe that again, I like to investigate the whatever investigation I have on its own merits, but if there's prior allegations from citizens, then there may be something to it. And we're seeing that with the officer-involved shootings that are happening across the country, where officers that are being terminated are being, like the situation in Clayton County, we're hearing that officer has some prior complaints. So there is something to it. There may be to it.
And what situation in Clayton County are you referring to?
The officer-involved shooting. No, I'm sorry, not officer, but there was a man that got pulled over in an Uber. Instead of focusing on the driver, they focused on the passenger in the back seat. And so that officer was terminated. So after the termination, more people have come out and said, yeah, this guy did this to me, this guy did this to me, this guy did this to me. So when we see stuff like that, it can lead to be, when citizens make complaints on an officer over and over and over, there may be something to it.
Okay. And how many allegations of excessive force does it take for APD to terminate an officer?
That is that I'm not sure if there's anything written, but that's definitely a deputy chief or a command staff decision.
Okay. In terms of Matthew Abad's investigation, did you also interview him?
I did.
And do you also have an independent recollection of Officer Abad?
Yes.
Did you doubt his truthfulness at all during the interview?
No.
And his story also made sense to you?
Yes, what I can recall, yes.
And in terms of preparation for Abad's interview, excuse me, the same preparation, watching the body cam footage?
Yes.
Okay. And I believe you said that the last time you watched the footage was yesterday. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. I'm going to share my screen and show a clip of the video to you right now. If you'll give me just a moment. Can you see my screen on your screen?
No, sir.
How about now?
Yes, sir, I can see it.
Okay. All right, so I'm going to show this video. If you have any trouble hearing it or seeing just let me know, and we'll
Yes,
try
sir.
to figure it out.
Okay.
Hey, stop the car! 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 Get out of the fucking car! Land police! Get out of the fucking car! Get out the car now! Get out the car! Let's go. Get out of the car. Get out of the car. Let's go. What are you doing, man? Tell me, what are you doing? Wait a minute. Hold on. No, hold on. You do not swipe my hands from me. Do you understand? Come out to the car. You got any weapons or anybody else? Check the car.
Okay. Do you think there's anything wrong with the way that defendant Abad acted in that video? In that
Objection.
for the record, that video is Plaintiff's Exhibit 1.2.
Objection. Again, as to form and as to outside the scope of what Investigator Nixon is here to testify to. Anything that Investigator Nixon is testifying to would be his personal opinion, not the city's opinion.
I would not have done that. Your client, he brushed Abad's hand off of his shoulder. To me, that wasn't enough to tackle him and knock him down. That's just me.
Okay. And we'll get to Vickers in a second. For now, I just want to focus on Officer Abad. So, specific to Officer Abad, is there anything that you think he did wrong in the video?
Objection. Again, as to form, this is Investigator Nixon's personal opinion, and he's not called to testify as to the city's opinion.
If you're talking about having his weapon out approaching a car, I'm assuming he had it out because he figured that since they almost got hit on the other road, a head-on collision, that he may have been trying to run him over. But I believe he holstered when he went to the window and was speaking to him. It was then when when we saw Vickers tackled him while they were conversing. So.
Okay. Is there anything that you think Defendant Abad should have done differently?
Same objection.
Not right offhand, because he was having a conversation with him. It didn't get physical until Vickers came and tackled him. And I believe Abad had holstered because he asked him, "What are you doing?" And that's when your client brushed his hand off. That's when Vickers tackled him, and it just went from there.
Okay. Was there anything wrong with Abad pointing the gun at my client as he approached the car?
No.
Do you think from watching the video that Officer Abad had the opportunity to stop Mr. Vickers from tackling my client?
I don't know if he saw him coming. Now, I might be wrong, but we can see in the camera, we can see Vickers running towards Abad, but I don't know if he saw him coming because Abad was conversing with your client.
Okay. If Officer Abad didn't holster his weapon while he was talking to Mr. Griffin, would that be a problem?
If he still had the weapon out?
Yes, sir.
It could be, because my focus would be on getting him in custody, because you already have the probable cause for arrest is the collision they had on the street on Chattahoochee. You already have a reason to arrest. So if he kept the gun out, yeah, I would say, my focus would be on getting him in cuffs.
Okay. And about the collision on Chattahoochee, have you seen any dash cam footage or body cam footage showing that near collision?
No, and I believe that's one of the things they got written up for, was the way they handled their body cameras. They were outside of policy with their body cameras.
Okay. And what is what's the general policy about dash cam footage?
Dash cam or body cam?
Dash cam in the vehicle.
If the vehicle is equipped with dash cam, it's supposed to activate it's supposed to start recording as soon as you flip the blue lights on.
Okay. So it's not,
proper.
I'm sorry. So it's
No.
it's not something that just automatically would record. So like if their lights weren't on and a car did almost hit them, it's not something that would be captured. They would have to activate a switch.
Correct, yes.
Okay. That makes sense.
I just want to pause for a moment because we're about 15 minutes from the top of the hour. And I just want to know about how much longer you have for Investigator Nixon.
I think we might be able to finish in 15 minutes, maybe 30 minutes. Okay. Now, in terms of Defendant Vickers and the way he acted in Plaintiff's Exhibit 1.2, is there anything wrong with the way he acted?
Objection in regards to form and as to what Investigator Nixon is here to testify as to. Anything that Investigator Nixon is testifying to now would be his personal opinion.
And Ms. Nair, I'm happy to give you a standing objection to any question outside the scope.
No, thank you. I'll object each time.
You can answer unless I can rephrase it or restate it for you. Do you think there's anything wrong with the way Defendant Vickers acted in Plaintiff's Exhibit 1.2?
Yes.
Do you think that Defendant Vickers was justified in his use of force?
Objection as to form. Anything that Investigator Nixon testifies to is his personal opinion and not a reflection of the city's opinion.
Again, I would have handled it differently. I wouldn't have tackled somebody like that for a swiping of the hand. So I would not have tackled.
Okay. Now I'm going to show you another video clip that's been marked as Plaintiff's Exhibit 4.2. If you'll give me just a second to get it set up here. Can you see the files on my screen, sir?
Yes, sir, I can.
Thank you. Okay. All right.
Break it up, man. I'm trying to race you, man. Come on, get out here and try it. Come on, man. Hey, man, put your weight on me. Shit. Weight on the foot is supposed to be hurt. Right. I'm not a guy. I would never do that to you guys. Bro, I don't know. That's a bad thing. I'm not a good bad thing. Let's go. Yeah, I'll take on this shit.
Mr. Nixon, do you think there's anything wrong with the way Defendant Vickers acted in Plaintiff's Exhibit 4.2?
Objection. Yes. Anything that Investigator Nixon testifies to is his personal opinion, not a reflection of the city's opinion.
Yes.
And what do you think he did wrong?
Same objection.
When a person is requesting aid in the way that your client was, if we were to start have an ambulance come and make that assessment.
Do you think do you think the way that Defendant Vickers spoke to Mr. Griffin was appropriate?
No.
All right, I want to show you a document that's been marked as Plaintiff's Exhibit 43. Can you see Plaintiff's Exhibit 43 on your screen?
Yes.
All right. Have you seen this document before? And I could scroll through it if you'd like to see the entire document.
No, it's my, I think it's the one I prepared. I authored this.
Okay. And does Plaintiff's Exhibit 43 contain summaries of your investigation?
Yes, it does.
All right. We'll look at page 28 of this document. Do you see, I'm going to go ahead and highlight it. Do you see the highlighted text that says SPO Vickers had to swerve the vehicle in order to not be struck by the oncoming car?
Correct.
And again, have you seen any video proof to support Vickers' allegation?
No. Now what that is SPO Vickers. That should be a summary of SPO Vickers' statement.
Okay. So
Yeah.
this does not contain your beliefs. This is just a summary of his
Correct.
statement.
Right. That's basically what he told me. Yes.
Okay. And so the findings in Plaintiff's Exhibit 43 are based entirely on Vickers and Abad's interviews, and I guess interviews of the other witnesses. Is that right?
Well, the findings actually, if you scroll to the very bottom, this is where it says this
Right
investigation finds. Yeah, that right there are the facts.
And these are the facts as you have found them to be.
Correct.
Your
Yes.
investigation. Okay.
Correct. Their statements are more just what they said. If they said the sky was gray, then it goes in because it's part of their statement. But within this investigation finds that's where the facts.
Sorry, I lost the. Sorry, I lost my place. If you'll give me just a second.
Not a problem.
Actually, this is a perfect time to take a pause. I need a 5-minute break.
Okay, we can do that.
Investigator Nixon, if you can go off camera and mute your microphone while we go on our 5-minute break, and we'll come back at 3 o'clock.
All right.
Before we go on a break, Ms. Nair, this is Jeff Butler. Just let me remind everybody that Investigator Dixon is under oath, so it would be inappropriate and a violation of the rule for anyone to speak with him about the deposition during the break.
Thank you. Thank you for that reminder.
All right.
Understood.
Can we go off a recording for just a half a second off the record?
Now.
There we go. Thank you. All right. Now, Mr. Nixon, can you see Plaintiff's Exhibit 43 on your screen?
I do. Yes.
All right. Do you see the highlighted field at the bottom of the screen that says, once he was tackled, Mr. Griffin stopped resisting?
Yes.
And I'll take this off. Now, we just watched the video of Mr. Griffin being tackled, right?
Correct.
Do you think Mr. Griffin was resisting arrest in that video?
I believe when he swiped the hand, Officer Abad was attempting to get him in custody.
Would you characterize? I believe earlier you called it a brush.
Correct.
Would you consider brushing off Officer Abad's hand to be resisting arrest?
There's instances of passive resistance where if I was to take somebody into custody and they just lay on the floor prone and not give me their arms and they just stiffen up, that's resisting. Also, although it's passive resistance, it's still resisting. So when Abad grabbed his shoulder or his shirt, it was to pull, I believe it was to pull him away from the car to get him in custody. And when he pushed his hand to the side. Now, also, I believe that was part of a statement that I wrote, that is, if that was part of a statement, that's what was told to me. That was not in my investigative findings.
Okay. Do you think that defendant Abad was justified in his decision to grab Mr. Griffin's arm?
Yes.
Okay. All right, I'm going to reshare the screen. This is still Plaintiff's Exhibit 43. Can you see the highlighted quotation at the top that says, yeah, several minutes after he was in handcuffs and we tried to get him up, he did complain that his foot or his leg was hurt?
Yes.
So is it fair to say that defendant Vickers and Abad knew that Mr. Griffin was injured after the tackle?
Yes.
And isn't it true isn't it true that police officers are supposed to request medical attention when a person is seriously injured?
Yes.
And the police officers in this case did not call an ambulance. Is that correct?
Correct.
Now, do you see there's another highlighted field on the same page? It says, we were as courteous as possible.
Yes.
And you just watched a video a few minutes ago where Vickers told Griffin that he was acting like a little girl, right?
Correct.
Is that courteous behavior?
Objection. No. Anything that Investigator Nixon testifies to is his personal opinion, not the opinion of the city. But you may answer as to your personal opinion, Investigator Nixon.
Yes, ma'am. In my opinion, no, it was not. When he said we were as courteous as possible, they had just got almost head-on collision. I believe it was raining that night. So there was a lot of factors that had them. Now, I'm not justifying their behavior, but there was a lot of factors that made them say what they said. But I'm not justifying their actions.
Okay. Were there any other APD employees that played a role in the investigation?
In the investigation, no. If you were talking about the officers that responded after the fact, I did not speak to them because they didn't witness what your client, his allegation as far as the breaking of his foot. They weren't there when that happened.
Okay. Do you know if the SUV that Vickers and Abad were in had a dash cam?
I don't believe it did. Our dash cams in many of the cars the technology in it is not like our body cameras. And so with the vast majority of them, they do not work. In this instance, I can't remember for sure, but I want to say that I was told there was no video.
Okay.
And if there was, I didn't get it. It was not provided to me.
I'm gonna share my screen with you again, and we're gonna watch a few more videos.
Yes.
All right. Do you think?
I have a question. I apologize. Is this video marked as an exhibit?
Yeah, so this is Plaintiff's Exhibit 4.1.
Okay, can you please identify what the exhibits are when you're...
Sure, yeah.
Thank you.
Mr. Nixon, Do you see anything wrong with what defendant Abad is doing in that video?
Objection as to form. This would be Investigator Nixon's personal opinion, not the opinion of the city.
Yes.
And what's wrong with what he's doing in the video?
After your client screamed for pain and fell to the ground, he didn't render any type of aid and did not call for an ambulance.
All right. I'm going to show you another video that's marked as Plaintiff's Exhibit 3.3.
I just like that's right. Tyler, there's nothing we can do about that. It's metal on bone. Once you get your grading, we'll take them off. But right now, you got to get in there. Okay, yes, sir. The longer we do this, the longer you're going to get paid. I got you. Okay. I'm just trying to let you understand. We don't want you to be a man. We're just trying to get you in there. You got this, bro. Let me slide you. Sorry. Not touching. Don't scream. Tyler, he's not even touching. Tyler, he's not even touching. I'll tell you what, just look your foot up, Tyler. Just look there. Tyler, you go with your foot. It's really happening.
Do you think there's anything wrong with the way that the police officers were behaving in that video?
Objection as to form. The opinions of Mr. Nixon are his own personal opinions and not the opinions of the city. You may answer if you have an opinion, Investigator Nixon.
Yes.
And what do you believe is wrong with the way that those police officers are behaving?
Same objection.
That they were pulling or pushing him into the wagon.
And what is this the vehicle that they were pushing him into? That doesn't appear to be an ambulance. What would that be called?
It's a prisoner the official name is a prisoner transport vehicle, but we call it the wagon. Like in the old days, they used to call it the paddy wagon. So we call it the wagon, but the official name of it is prisoner transport vehicle.
Okay. All right. Now I'm going to show you another video that's been marked as Plaintiff's Exhibit 5.2.
So when he got to the back here, what was he doing?
Trying to turn around. Yeah, and grab him. Yeah, he wasn't stepping over. He was maybe over. Yeah, hit the gas. Yeah, and I was stuck. I don't try for time. I damn near shot. I was 2 seconds from bullets in his window.
Mr. Nixon, is there anything, and I'll just represent to you the voice that you heard saying that he damn near shot him was Officer Abad. Is there anything wrong with Officer Abad saying that?
No, if he's talking about when he was walking down the driveway and your client was driving up the driveway, he'd have to, if he did shoot, he'd have to articulate a little bit more how he was in fear of his life and that sort of thing. Was it reasonable? Was it necessary? What Officer Abad is doing is, I call it hype talk, talking stuff to get the other officers, just talking stuff. But it was probably inappropriate to say now that we have these body cameras, and the body cameras are picking up a lot of personal conversations that are inappropriate in nature.
Okay. And would you would consider that to be an inappropriate conversation?
If he, like I said, if he did fire the bullets, because he'd have to articulate that the car was coming at him and he had no other choice but to get out the way. So what he was telling the other officer was kind of out of text because the elements were not there for him to discharge his weapon.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, I didn't mean to cut you off, sir.
No problem. The other officer doesn't know that your client was, the vehicle was moving very slow or it might have been stuck. So that's why I said that Officer Abad saying that it doesn't match what really happened. So the conversation in itself may be deemed inappropriate regarding these body cameras because the body cameras are subject to open records.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, had Officer Abad, given the same video that we have the same facts, had Officer Abad fired into the vehicle and shot Mr. Griffin, would that have been a proper shooting?
Objection, speculative, and outside the context. This goes beyond the scope, and it will require a separate investigation. Investigator Nixon can't speak to a hypothetical situation without more facts.
If he can answer, he can speak to it, unless you're instructing him not to answer, which I don't think there's any basis to do that. Mr. Nixon, if you can answer, you can.
If he had discharged at the time he had his weapon out, no, it would not have been a valid use of force.
All right. Now I want to show you a few video clips, few more video clips about Donald Vickers' body camera. If you'll give me just a second here. All right. The video I'm about to show is Plaintiff's Exhibit 2.5.
Hey, I'm gonna save my pain in my life.
Mr. Nixon, is there anything wrong with what Mr. Vickers or Officer Vickers did in that video?
Yes, he turned his body camera off.
Are police officers allowed to turn their body camera off to save battery life?
I have heard of officers doing that. Now the camera he was using at that time was, we have new cameras now that with a little bit longer battery life, but per our SOP, I believe identifies where we can turn our body camera off to extend the life.
Okay. All right. Let me show you another video marked as Plaintiff's Exhibit 3.1. Is there anything wrong with the way that Officer Vickers was behaving in this video?
Yeah, that's the way the SOP is written, I believe, is that had something happened from the time he turned his camera off to the time he turned his camera back on, his body camera would not have captured it.
Okay, and we can see from the timestamp up in the upper right corner, it says 8/12/43 or 8/12/50. I guess let me turn from at the beginning. It says 8/12/42 when the camera comes back on. Sorry. Do you see that up there?
Yes, I do. Yes.
And so when he turned the camera off at 8/11/01, that would mean that he turned the camera off for less than 2 minutes, right?
Correct.
And something important to your investigation could have happened in that 2 minutes, right?
Correct. Yes, sir.
Do you have any idea why Officer Vickers turned his camera
Objection.
off?
I apologize. Finish your question, Mr. Khan.
Do you have any idea why Officer Vickers turned his camera off for just 2 minutes?
Objection as to form, that would be speculative. And Investigator Nixon is not called as a fact witness. He's called for his opinions for the city of Atlanta, and we're going way beyond the scope at this point, Mr. Khan.
Mr. Nixon, if you have an answer, you're free to answer.
I don't know why he turned it off.
Does it seem wrong to you that he turned his camera off? You've got to let me finish my question before you.
I apologize. Go ahead.
Does it seem wrong to you that that Officer Vickers turned his camera off?
Objection as to form. If Investigator Nixon can answer as to the speculative nature of your question, he
You
may.
stop testifying for the witness. These speaking objections are borderline unethical. If you want to put your objection on the record, you're free to do that, but you can't testify for this witness.
Speculation is not unethical, Mr. Khan, and I'm not drawing speaking objections. It's a speculative question, and if Investigator Nixon can answer, he would be answering as to his personal opinion and not on behalf of the city. And Investigator Nixon, if you are able to answer Mr. Khan's question, you may.
Can you repeat the question?
Sure. Does it seem wrong to you that Officer Vickers turned his camera off?
Per our SOP, yes.
Does it seem suspicious to you that he turned his camera off?
Objection, same objection.
I don't know if I would use the word suspicious, but it's wrong.
Okay. I'm going to show Plaintiff's Exhibit 5.2 again.
So when he got to the back here, what was he doing?
Trying to turn around.
Yeah.
Yeah, he wasn't stuck there.
Yeah.
Hit the gas.
Yeah.
And I was stuck. I damn near shot. I was searching for bullets.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I'm going to withdraw that question. I showed you the wrong video clip. I apologize. Approximately how many instances of police misconduct have you investigated during your time with OPS?
Oh. I would have to say a lot. Now, when you say misconduct, are you talking about something that may be criminal?
I guess I can rephrase the question to narrow it a little bit. Approximately how many complaints of excessive force have you investigated during your time at OPS?
Oh, wow. Ooh. A lot. I've been here since 2012.
So would you say too many instances of excessive force to count?
Yes, because like I said, I'm on the officer involved shooting team, and they're police shootings, but they're also use of force incidents also. A lot.
Okay. In your experience with OPS, have you ever seen another police officer state on the record that another police officer used excessive force?
No.
Have you ever heard of it? Oh, I'm sorry.
No, I was just gonna say not that I can recall. No.
Okay. Have you ever heard of a department-wide practice where officers refuse to bear witness against a fellow officer who is alleged to have violated a citizen's rights?
A department-wide practice?
Yes, sir.
No.
Well, have you ever heard of a custom or an informal practice where officers refuse to testify against other officers alleged to have committed another citizen's rights?
Yes, I have heard of that. Yes.
Is there a name for that practice?
Yeah, I can't think of it right now, but there is a name. It does have a name.
Have you ever heard of the phrase "the police code of silence"?
The police code of silence? Not often as the other. I can't think of the other one, but I've heard of that one, but not as much as I've heard the other one.
Would the other phrase be omerta?
I've never heard of that one.
Well, what does the phrase "code of silence" mean to you in the context of police work?
That I'm going to speak on the police form because I think every occupation has a code of silence, if you want to use that terminology, where you don't tell the misdeeds of another officer while they were on duty. And like I said, that can go for every occupation.
But that is a thing that exists in the City of Atlanta Police Department?
That I don't know, because I've never had interaction to talk with someone about that. When they come here, that we have a truthfulness policy that you must tell the truth, and if we catch them in not telling the truth, they can be. Okay. I've heard what you're speaking of, but I just have not come in contact with it.
Okay. Would you agree that police officers who testify against other police officers are ostracized?
I have not seen it, but I have heard it. Not necessarily with this department, but I've seen it. I've heard about it with other departments.
Have you ever heard of a police officer who testifies against another police officer referred to as a rat or a snitch?
I'm going to object at this moment just because this line of questioning goes beyond the scope. And Investigator Nixon is testifying as to his personal knowledge and not answering on behalf of the city's opinions. But you may answer if you have personal knowledge.
I don't have personal knowledge, no ma'am.
Have you ever heard of APD officers deactivating their body cameras to make sure their stories line up before completing a report?
I've heard of APD officers deactivating their body cameras, but not for that purpose. When we see that they deactivated their cameras and we inquire, some people have told me that they were on the phone with their spouse. Others, they went to the bathroom, but not for the purpose of completing a report or anything like that.
Do you think there's a department-wide problem with excessive force?
No. We have instances, but it's not an epidemic or anything like that. We do have, I'm not sure what the stats are to compare us nationwide, but I don't think we have a real bad problem with it. We have our instances, but I don't believe it's an epidemic.
All right, I'm gonna share my screen with you. Show Plaintiff's Exhibit 500. Can you see Plaintiff's Exhibit 500 on your screen?
Yes. And
this is an 11 Alive article that was recently published. I want to ask you something about this. If you turn to page 4, do you see that highlighted paragraph that says, according to the file Griggs said Howard gave him, there are currently 32 police officers facing criminal prosecution in Fulton County. At least 13 of those officers were involved in 7 fatal shooting cases going back 4 years?
Yes.
I read that correctly?
Yes. Now, I've seen that article also. And the Griggs is Gerald Griggs. And the 32 officers we don't know if they're all Atlanta police officers because it says Fulton County. So I'm assuming it's East Point, Fulton County, all the counties that are in, all the cities that are in Fulton County to add up to that 32.
Okay. Does the fact that there are 32 pending criminal cases against police officers for excessive force indicate a potential systemic problem to you?
Objection as to form.
No.
You may.
Only because there may be 32 officers, but this is going back however many years. Now, if you say there's 32 officers in 6 months or maybe 1 year, yes, possibly. But not knowing how 13 officers, okay, 13 of the officers going back 4 years. So it depends on the span that we're talking about, because I personally know of some of our files that go back 6 years that's sitting on his desk.
Okay. And do you see the next paragraph that says, quote, "We've got a serious police brutality problem in the city of Atlanta. We've got a serious police brutality problem in the state of Georgia. and a serious police brutality problem in Fulton County, Griggs said.
Yes.
Do you agree that there's a serious police brutality problem in the city of Atlanta?
No. I would like to see where he got to make that statement. I would have to see where he's got his facts from.
How many instances of police brutality would it take for you to consider it a serious problem in the city of Atlanta?
It depends on several factors. The scope, now brutality is a broad word. Were they beaten up? Were they shot? Were they, whatever specifically happened to the person? Each one would have to be taken in on its own merit. And if we start seeing that, okay, we've had one this week, one next week, one next week. Okay, we have to see, okay, what exactly is going on? And is it all coming from one particular zone? That would be another issue we look at. If all of them are coming from zone 1, okay, we got something going on in zone 1. But if it's spread out throughout the city, then it's nothing really that we can identify.
Okay. Does APD track allegations of excessive force?
Yes, that would be in our file room. With each specific officer?
I guess sort of just in general, like is there a report that details all allegations of excessive force?
I'm sure there is, yes.
Are you aware of an annual report that the city generates called the Use of Force Report that does such?
No.
Are you familiar with the Atlanta Citizen Review Board?
I am.
Do you often deal with the ACRB?
Whenever whenever they intake an investigation, there's also a corresponding investigation on this side. And that's usually when I interact with the ACRB.
When the when the ACRB issues a finding of excessive force, what does that generally mean to OPS?
That the criteria they use to come to that decision, whatever force the officer used, it violated. They were able to substantiate a sustained violation of use of force.
Are the standards used by ACRB different than the City of Atlanta standards?
That I don't know. I'm not sure what they use to determine a sustain or not a sustain or exoneration. I'm sure our SOPs are in there somewhere, but I'm not sure.
How does an ACRB finding, or I guess sustained finding of excessive force impact OPS's investigation?
I normally their findings as of since the pandemic hit, I haven't seen any files from the ACRB. I don't think, but in the past, now of course everyone knows that the ACRB they're now have been given a lot of power, different from how they were when this incident happened. So, if I'm correct, they could sustain an officer on use of force, but it was still up to the chief to make that recommendation if we disagreed with it.
Okay. So then
that's different now.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, but it's different now. Now that the ACRB has been given the authority that they've been given, now their findings are going to be taken into consideration along with our findings.
Okay. So I guess, are there times when the ACRB finds excessive force, but then OPS does not find excessive force?
I've heard some cases, yes.
Now, I think you verified the city's interrogatory responses. Is that correct?
I think I did. Did I? You said verified?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Okay. And did you help provide the information to the city for the responses?
Yes.
Uh, let's take a quick 5-minute break. I think I'm pretty close to being done. Reconvene at say 3:40.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Okay.
Investigator Nixon, just turn your camera and your mic.
All right. Mr. Nixon, I want to thank you again for your time. I've just got a few more questions and then we'll let you get out of here.
Yes, sir.
Just some really general background questions. Kind of want to revisit your training and education just very briefly, and then we'll let you go.
Yes, sir.
So you said that, I think you said that you'd been an OPS investigator since 2006?
I've been an investigator since 2006, but here at OPS since 2012.
Okay. 2012. And so in the past 8 years at OPS, is it fair to say that you have investigated hundreds, if not thousands, of cases of excessive force?
I would say if I'm alone, maybe not. I wouldn't say hundreds, but a lot of times other investigator, I might assist with another investigator on something, like go and pull some video off a wall or something like that. So with that being said, maybe hundreds, but myself being assigned to me by myself, it's not that much.
Okay. And in terms of training, what sort of training do you have that is relevant to, I guess, analyzing use of force in real world situations?
Yes, sir. Besides the training we get at the academy on a yearly basis, I've also a force science analyst. And what force science is where the application of force is broken down into a science, basically, for force science. And when I went to the certification course, they teach you how to look at a situation from every optic available. For instance, if you're chasing someone and that person has a weapon in their hand and they turn around and start shooting at you and you return fire, striking them, the optics are that we shot him in the back, but he has a weapon in his hand and he was shooting at you. So another example would be, there's a term called looming. Looming, let's say if I'm standing in the middle of a road and a car is coming at me at a high rate of speed. Now, if it's from a distance, the only thing we can see the car doing, the car is becoming larger as we see it coming towards us. It's close that you make in your mind that, hey, I'm going to shoot this car. So by the time you pull out your weapon and fire, it may already be passing you, but you made up your mind to shoot while it was still off in a distance. And so when we shoot the side of a car, the optics are we shot it as it was going past us, but the officer actually made up in their mind to shoot when it was coming towards them.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. And so you said the name was of the certification was Force Science Analyst?
Yeah, well, no, Force Science. That's
Science.
Yeah, FORCE.
Okay. Yeah. And what sort of course did you have to take to get that certification?
It was a 5-day course. And what it does is it just helps me to be able to look at these use of force cases very narrowly, but it doesn't change the decision making. I don't make decisions on the cases. The decision makers are those that are above me. So I can say something that's bad all day long, but it still can change. It goes up the chain of command.
Okay. So other than the Force Science certification and the training at the academy, do you have any other specialized training in the area of excessive force?
No, sir. That would be it.
Okay. Let's see. And what's your educational background, sir?
Yes, I have my bachelor's degree in criminal justice, and I have my master's degree in public administration.
And where are your degrees from?
St. Leo and Walden University. St. Leo would be my bachelor's, and Walden would be my master's.
Okay. All right. I have no further questions. Thank you very much for your time.
Hey, thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Take care.
Investigator Nixon, I have a few questions for you before we conclude.
Yes, ma'am.
You are not required to review history of an individual in order to competently complete your investigation. Is that accurate?
Objection,
Yes,
leading.
ma'am.
Are you required to review an individual's history to competently complete your investigation?
No, ma'am.
Are you tasked with recommending discipline regarding a particular investigation?
No, ma'am.
Have you ever been required or tasked with recommending discipline?
No, ma'am.
If you are called upon to give your personal opinion as to an investigation, is that informal opinion?
Yes, ma'am, it is.
Okay. Now you were called here today to testify in regards to the city as to topics number 1 and 11 only. Is that correct?
Objection,
Yes.
leading.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand your answer.
Oh, yes.
Objection, leading.
And the other responses that you gave today, were those responses based on your personal knowledge only?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, you testified earlier in regards to how you would handle or how you would have handled certain instances for this incident. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, when you testified as to how you would have handled that, was that based on your personal experience as to how you would have handled it?
Yes, ma'am.
Are there multiple ways in which an officer can handle an instance?
Yes, ma'am.
Objection, vague.
Are there multiple ways in which the officers in this case could have handled the incident?
Yes, ma'am.
And
Objection, vague.
in those multiple ways that an individual could have handled the incident, does the SOPs provide different options for handling certain types of incidences?
I believe so.
And you were talking about a case, or you testified to a case, Graham, regarding the totality of the circumstances. Do you recall responding to that question?
Yes, ma'am.
Objection, leading.
When you answered as to the totality of the circumstances, do you recall what circumstances are taken into consideration from
Objection,
Graham?
vague.
The crime that was committed. The crime the suspect is alleged to have committed.
Do you know if there are any other circumstances that an officer can take into consideration?
Yeah, there's 2 more, and I can't think of them right now.
Okay. You testified earlier as to body camera footage being extremely useful in investigations.
Yes, ma'am.
Objection, leading.
Mr. Khan, I haven't asked a question.
He answered your not a question.
Do you recall testifying earlier as to video cameras being helpful in investigations?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you need a video camera or a body camera in order for you to make a finding of fact?
No. No, ma'am.
So when you said that it is useful, what did you mean by that?
That it's, instead of the totality of the circumstances, weighing, if the officer tells us one thing, the complainant tells us one thing, if we have body camera, the body camera can pretty much definitively say, yes, it happened or no, it happened, as opposed to not having body camera where we don't have any proof. If the officer hit him, we're looking for bruises on the person, any scars or anything like that. And if the person doesn't have anything to substantiate the use of force that the officer may have done, then it's a not sustained, as opposed to having a body camera that shows officers slapping a person or doing whatever and not hitting a mark. So the body camera would sustain the officer because we have that footage.
And you testified earlier when shown a video of Officer Vickers turning off his body camera. Do you recall reviewing that video?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you recall if that footage or the time in which the footage was turned off, do you recall if that happened before or after Officer Vickers made contact with the plaintiff in this case?
I believe that was after.
And were you called to investigate the use of force for Investigator or for Officer Vickers?
Not necessarily the use of force, but the whole investigation.
Would that time frame have assisted you in making a determination as to whether or not the use of force was appropriate or not?
No, no. The use of force, Vickers turned his body camera on after the tackle.
You testified earlier as to the amount of cases that you handle regarding use of force. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Objection leading.
And in your testimony, you described the different types of use of force. Is there a wide range of use of force
That an officer can do?
Yes, sir.
Yes, there's if we use our utility belt, we have pepper spray, aspeton, the weapon, taser, physical, hands-on. Those are just off the top of my head.
Is discharging your weapon also use of force?
Yes, ma'am.
Is discharging your weapon but not making contact with someone use of force?
Taking out the holster?
No, discharging.
Oh, discharging? Yes, ma'am.
But not making contact with someone else. Is that considered use of force as well?
I would say so, just in a technical way, even though we didn't hit the person. If the person had any other type of situation going on, if it can be, I would have to actually look that up, but I believe so. But I may be wrong.
And is physically grabbing someone considered use of force as well?
Yes, ma'am.
Just have one or two more questions.
No problem.
You drew up a investigative report for this case. Is that
Yes, ma'am.
accurate? When you drew up the investigative report, did you do so for both for Officer Vickers and Officer Abad?
Yes.
Were those separate investigative reports?
No, it's all in that one file.
When you did your investigation, did you interview both Vickers and Abad?
Correct. Yes, ma'am.
And are you required to put in your report, your investigative report, whatever they tell you?
A summarization, and usually with the report will also be, we audio record the interviews. So whatever we don't put on paper, the file will also have the entire audio interview.
Okay, so you are required to put whatever they tell you in the investigation?
Yeah, a summary. Yes, ma'am. Mm-hmm.
Objection leading.
Now, when you include what they put in the investigative report, does that automatically mean that is your finding of fact?
No, the finding of fact is, you say that again?
Does what the individual you're investigating tell you automatically mean that you make it a finding of fact?
No, ma'am. It's only what I can.
I'm sorry. Bless you,
It's
Mr. Khan.
It's only what I can prove. The finding of fact is what I can prove. If they were at work, that if I put in both Officer Vickers and Abad were at work on April the 5th, I can prove that.
Okay. I don't believe I have any other questions for you. Thank you, Investigator Nixon. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, ma'am.
No further questions from us.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Enjoy your day.
You as well.